Listen to what you're telling yourself. I think it sounds weird, but a lot of the conversations we have with ourselves very much go unnoticed, right? So getting your mental talk, especially your mental self-talk, under control, especially with serving, is huge. If you're going back there thinking, I hope I don't miss, you have a higher chance of missing than if you think, oh, I'm going to make this serve in. Welcome back to the VGC podcast. My name is Christopher Knowles, and today we are going to go back to our regularly scheduled program of answering your guys' questions. If you didn't see the last episode, I have started putting out big lesson podcasts, which is basically I take some of the biggest lessons I've learned throughout my entire career of being the bottom of the bench kid and also being a Division I kid. Take those lessons and share those with you to hopefully set you on the right path to be as successful as you can in your own personal volleyball career. But I also want to keep answering your guys' questions because you guys do put a good amount of comments on our TikTok and our Instagram. So that is what we're doing today, is answering those questions. And then the next episode that's coming out will be another big lesson video. So every week will either be a big lesson or a question answer podcast. And then there will also be Mindset Mentality Mondays, of where I talk about something to get your mind right for the week and something to work on with your mentality for the week, because I think it is very not talked about enough of the mentality side of volleyball and of sports. It's always physical, how you do this, how you do that, rather than how do you process this, how do you think about that. So, but today, getting a little bit off track, I digress. We are going to jump straight in like we always do with answering these questions that you guys put in our comment section. So first question is, how do you get out of a serve slump? I had a great serving tournament, then it kind of fell off. Yeah, so I've definitely had serving slumps. I've had entire tournament slumps before, and they are not fun at all. But I think there's really two aspects to it. There is the skill aspect to it, but then there's also the natural aspect to it. So I've been playing for about 7-ish years, and something that I've realized is throughout the earliest parts of my career, like the first couple years, I was always chasing like the perfect game of I just ball out and hitting and blocking and passing and serving, and all of it's perfect, right? But something that I've really realized as I've matured is that the perfect game is near impossible, right? All pieces of your skills that you've been developing I don't want to say not, because I don't want to cancel it out for myself too, but like it is a very unlikely for your serve and pass and hitting and blocking to all be perfect in one game. So there's a little bit of aspect of that, right? That some days your serve is just not going to go in, and that's fine, and that's okay. That's just the natural process. That the way I see it is this, right? If you take all 4 skills, some days passing, blocking, and hitting are going to be great, and then serving is just kind of going to have to take the fall that day, right? But then the other day, hitting is not really clicking, but you're an absolute wall on the block, and your passing's pretty good, and your serving is effective, right? It's always going to be flowing and changing of how well you're doing with certain skills, especially in tournaments, just because that's the natural human behavior, right? You even look at professional players, like in other sports, like NBA players. Sometimes Steph Curry shoots 10% from the field, and sometimes he's regular Steph Curry shooting 80%, right? But that doesn't make him less of who he already is. It's just that natural way of being an athlete, that things aren't always going to be clicking for a whole year, not even maybe even a whole month, right? Within a month span, your serve is going to take some hits sometimes, right? So that's the biggest thing I realized, is kind of detaching from the fact that every part of my game is going to be great or at least good every time I play, and that's just not true. Sometimes you're going to get blocked a lot, and sometimes you're just going to OT everyone. Sometimes you're going to get 5 aces in a game, and sometimes you're going to hit the ball out 10 times, right? Serve it out. So there's just that natural aspect of, if it was one game or one tournament and you couldn't really get the serve in, that's not really a slump, right? A slump is if you just cannot get your serve in for like a month straight. And so that leads me into the second thing, of the physical thing, is something that I think especially happened with me was when I would have a serving slump, it was either mental or physical. And the physical side is that it was time for a breakthrough and I wasn't changing anything, right? So I would do like with my jump serve. When I first started doing a jump serve, it was around my sophomore and junior year of high school. And it was pretty effective. It was pretty good the first couple times I did it. But then I hit a little bit of a stretch through the middle of our high school season. Uh Thanks, someone's car horn is going off. Uh, but so it was towards the middle of like I can't remember, it was sophomore or junior year, but it was the middle of the season, and just the serve was just not it. It was just not happening. And something that I realized, it was because I was getting taller and my length that I was giving myself to approach and jump serve was staying the same. So as I needed more room to jump serve, I was not giving myself that room. And so that's where I just kind of hit a wall with my serving, right? So with your serve, there could be a thing that like needs to be changed and needs to be adapted and improve, and you're not improving it, right? So that's a little bit of like trying new things. Okay, I'm going to toss my serve higher, or toss the toss higher. I'm going to give myself more room like I did. Give myself higher contact, work on doing a higher contact. So it can be a physical thing that something needs to be changed in order to get that flow again of like, okay, now we're getting the serve back in because I changed something, I made something better. But it's also the mentality thing. If you are in a slump, right, you haven't made a serve for a month, let's say. If you're going back there to serve in a tournament or a practice, listen to what you're telling yourself. I think it sounds weird, but a lot of the conversations we have with ourselves very much go unnoticed, right? So getting your mental talk, especially your mental self-talk, under control, especially with serving, is huge. If you're going back there thinking, I hope I don't miss, you have a higher chance of missing than if you think, oh, I'm going to make this serve in, right? Both these things of self-talk want the same result. I hope I don't miss, and this serve is going to go in. Both have the same result of wanting the ball to go in, right? But how we talk to ourselves, in like what kind of, is it positive or negative sort of light that we talk to ourselves in, that is going to dictate truly what we physically do, right? If I tell myself, oh, I can't touch 11 foot ever, I'll never be able to touch 11 foot, then I will always physically and any way possible find ways to limit myself to never touch 11 foot. That's just how it is, right? And that's how it is because that's what I've experienced myself. I'm always like, oh, I can't. Before I started jump serving in the first place, like my dad was the one that was trying to get me to jump serve for the longest time. I was like 6'5" and still jump floating, right? And he was like, you have to jump serve, you have to jump serve. And I kept telling myself, I'm like, dude, I can't jump serve. It's not good at all. It's not going to work. Kept jump floating until I finally was like, okay, well, let me try it. Jump serve, nailed it, and now I jump serve to this day, right? So that's why I say when you put that limiting mental barrier on yourself, then you will literally never go above it. Because I was jump floating for 90% of my career until I was like, okay, well, let me try jump serving. And then I just took off and it just launched my ability to serve. So that's what I'm saying with this. If you keep going back there and you're like, oh, well, I'm going to miss. Oh, I hope I don't miss. Oh, dude, it would suck if I hit it in the net right now. You're probably going to hit it in the net, right? Because you're thinking about that. You're thinking about hitting in the net, right? And so if you flip that and you're like, okay, I'm going to serve this in the deep corner. I'm going to serve this super tough. I'm going to be super aggressive. I'm going to give myself a nice high toss. This serve is going to be great. I'm going to hit it high. I'm going to hit it hard. I'm going to hit it in. Most likely those three things are going to happen because that is what you are making your mind focus on, right? If you're making your mind focus on not hitting the net, then you're focusing on the net. If you're focusing your mind on hitting it deep, you're focusing on getting it over the net and hitting it deep. So how you talk to yourself plays a huge role, especially in a slump. So if you are actually in a slump and you didn't just have one bad tournament or two bad tournaments isn't even a slump. I would say like 4 or 5 bad tournaments is a slump. But if you are actually in a slump, right? Pay attention to what you are telling yourself when you serve or even just pass or hit or whatever it is. But for this question, for serving, are you telling yourself, oh, I'm going to go back there and be super aggressive? You're like, oh, I hope I don't miss, right? And then the physical aspect of maybe it's time for you to adapt and change some part of that part of your game that you're working on, which is serving right now. But then also the thing of it could just be one bad tournament, right? How you serve, how you hit, how you block, how you pass is going to not change in the fact of like the fundamentals go away, but how well you perform in those skills will ebb and flow and change and adapt, right? So we just have to accept that that's the natural process of being a volleyball player, especially. So those are those three things. Focus on those three things because those are some things that I've used personally and kind of realized myself, and you will be good and on your way. Question number 2. What can I do to fix my technique when it comes to my penultimate and last step being way too close beside each other? That is a really good question. So I think that's a really good question because not a lot of players have asked that question of the actual specific step. So your mind is very much in the correct place. And this is actually something that was actually exposed to me by one of the players I was working with recently. So one of the players, like, I was giving an example of what a transition was supposed to look like with my film. And he was like, dude, why is your penultimate step or your second to last step not like super long? And I looked at it and I was like, dude, you're right. Like, this kid's like 15 and I'm 20. And I was like, you're right. Like, my second to last step needs to be longer. And so that's what I've been working on for the past couple months now. But I would say to fix your technique, and how that story leads into what I was going to say, is this is what I'm working on right now. And the ways that I've been fixing my technique, especially with years of habitually doing the same thing, is when I would say it's the two biggest things for me is when I warm up. With our warm up that we do like an approach, right? We warm up our approach. We like do our approach jump and like tuck our knees to our chest, right? To kind of just warm everything up. And with that has helped me start getting in the flow of how it's supposed to feel, right? So not even doing it with a ball, right? Not even hitting, not even on the net, just making the approach itself with that longer penultimate step. I think that has really exposed it to start building that new habit that I want to build, and obviously that you want to build now too. So that's what I would say is break it down to its simplest form, right? I do it with warm-ups, but like no ball, no net, no nothing, just strictly doing the footwork and starting to build that new habit of getting that second step farther, right? Because especially with something like footwork, with something that is so like built into us and ingrained to us from doing it over and over for multiple years. My dog is freaking out right now. From doing it for so long, like it's going to take time to build a new habit, right? Because if you've been playing for 4 years, right, and you've been doing the same approach and now you're trying to change a new approach for a month, right? If we multiply both of those by 10, right? So 4 would turn into 40, right? And 1 month would turn into 10 months, right? If I can do math. Who is more experienced, a 40-year-old or a 10-month-old, right? So you're relying on a 10-month-old to give you better results than a 40-year-old, right? If you think about it like that, of how old your habits and skills are, right? So it's going to take time, right? But the more you, I would say, can break it down to its simplest form of do it with no ball, no net, no nothing, just the feet, that is going to start building on that new habit and building on it pretty quickly. But then I would also say, for me, something I've done is also incorporate it into my play as well, of like giving myself a little bit more space backwards so I have to take a longer penultimate step, right? Like, because if I don't, then I'm literally not going to get there. So I would say those are the two biggest things, is make it a challenge for you of like putting yourself in a situation where you have to do it a certain way, because like that's the way I do it, is I back up a little bit more, so I have to take that longer step. But then also break it down to its simplest form. You can do it in warm-ups like I do, or you can just kind of do it at home of practicing the footwork 1,000 times, and then understand that the process is going to take time, because it's going to be a slow build of the more you do it, the more it'll become a habit without you even having to think about it, like how your approach is now. You don't even have to think about it, right? And at one point you did have to think about it. So now we kind of have to go back to that first step of having to think about it every single time until we don't have to think about it and we still do it automatically. So that's what I'm going through and working on right now, and I would say that's the best way to do it. So those are the 2 questions that I've answered for today. I hope you guys got a lot of value from these. If you're not in your own serving slump and you don't have to work on your own footwork, at least taking away a valuable lesson from this episode. And yeah, if you like these episodes, you like this new way of how I'm shooting the VGC podcast, share the show or let me know, direct message me or comment to me, hey, I love the show, or share it. The more you guys share this stuff and like it and comment on it, the more I can see that you guys actually enjoy watching these certain episodes. But yeah, share this show, and it's always better to grow together. So see you guys next week.